We've heard some beautiful music and some very inspiring personal stories today. Unfortunately, I now need to talk to us about some very dark things. Our world and everything that we hold precious is in great danger, and it is up to us to protect it. A generation ago, we all understood that nuclear war would destroy the world, and millions of people around the world came together into a powerful international movement that stopped the arms race and helped to end the Cold War. But when the Cold War ended, we all started to act as though the nuclear weapons had gone away, and they hadn't. In fact, there are today 15,000 nuclear warheads in the world. The vast majority, about 95%, are in the arsenals of the United States and Russia. The rest are shared by 7 other nuclear weapons states, and all 9 of these countries are actively modernizing and upgrading their nuclear arsenals at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars. We know that even a very limited nuclear war, as might take place between India and Pakistan, 2 of the smaller nuclear weapon states, would be a disaster for the entire human race. If they went to war and used just half of their nuclear arsenals, less than 0.5% of the world's nuclear arsenals, 20 to 30 million people would be killed in the first week, from the explosions, from the fires, from the radiation. But that's only part of the story, because the fires that these weapons started would put 5 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere, blocking out the sun, disrupting climate and food production around the world, and triggering a global famine that could kill up to 2 billion people, a third of the human race. A war between the United States and Russia would be far worse. We have been told for 25 years that we don't need to worry about this. Russia and America aren't enemies anymore. They won't fight. Well, recent events in Ukraine and Syria have shown us just how false those assurances were. And the nuclear saber rattling that both countries have engaged in has underlined the danger we face. So let's look for a minute at what would happen if their weapons are used. I want to start by describing to you the effects of a modern nuclear attack on a large city. We're all familiar with the image of Hiroshima, wiped flat by the atomic bomb. This was one small weapon. An attack today on a large city like New York would involve not one weapon, but 10 or 15 nuclear bombs, each of them 10 or 50 times more powerful than the weapon that destroyed Hiroshima. To understand what that would look like, let me use the model of a single 20 megaton explosion. This model actually underestimates the destruction that would take place if there were many smaller weapons used, but it gives us an adequate understanding. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form, reaching out for 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 20 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is hotter than the surface of the sun, and everything would be vaporized. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself would disappear. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the explosion would generate winds in excess of 600 miles per hour. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobile sheet metal would melt. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat would still be so great that everything flammable would burn. Cloth, paper, gasoline, heating oil, plastic, it would all ignite. Hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the next half hour would coalesce into a giant firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. All of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of New York City, we're talking about 15 million people dead in a half an hour. And if this were part of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, this same level of destruction would be visited on every major city in both countries. But again, this is only part of the story, because the fires started by these weapons would put 150 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. And that would drop temperatures across the planet by some 15 degrees. In the interior regions of North America and Eurasia, the temperatures would drop 50 degrees. We have not seen conditions on this planet that cold in 18,000 years, since the coldest moment of the last ice age. And under these conditions, ecosystems would collapse. Food production would stop. The vast majority of the human race would starve to death. And it is possible we would become extinct as a species. Now, it is important to understand this is not just some scenario I've cooked up, some nightmare to frighten you. This is a real and present danger. Even if some crisis like Ukraine or Syria doesn't escalate into war between the United States and Russia, there's always the possibility that some accident will provoke a nuclear exchange. And we know of at least 5 occasions in the last 35 years when either Moscow or Washington prepared to launch nuclear war in the mistaken belief that it was already under attack. So why am I telling you these things? Because while this is the future that will be if we don't take action, it is not the future that must be. Nuclear weapons are not a force of nature. They're not an act of God. We built them with our own hands, and we know how to take them apart. The choice is ours. Fortunately, at this time, a new movement is growing around the world, led by the countries which do not currently have nuclear weapons, a movement to abolish these weapons once and for all. The non-nuclear weapon states are calling on the 9 countries which have these weapons to take their obligations seriously and to negotiate a treaty which will set up a detailed, enforceable, verifiable regime for eliminating these weapons. 140 of these countries have pledged to negotiate an interim treaty to ban the possession of nuclear weapons, to make it illegal to own them, as a way of pressuring the nuclear weapons states. And at the level of civil society, hundreds of thousands of people have come together in the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapon, ICAN, which brings together the members of some 500 organizations in 95 countries around the world. But if this campaign is to succeed, each one of you needs to join your voice to the effort. No one of you can do this all by yourself, but every one of you needs to do that part of the task which is yours to do. By telling you of these things tonight, I have placed a terrible burden on your shoulders, because once you know of this danger, you have a responsibility to act to prevent this from happening, and it's a responsibility that will not go away until these weapons are removed. But if this is a burden, I think it's also a gift. Every one of us wants to do good in our life. We have been given the opportunity to save the world, and that is a very good thing to do. Most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the great tale, The Lord of the Ring, which tells of the desperate struggle to destroy the Ring of Power before it destroys Middle-earth. Well, on this Earth, nuclear weapons are the closest we've ever come to a Ring of Power. And the struggle to rid our world of these weapons is every bit as desperate and every bit as heroic as the quest undertaken by the Fellowship of the Ring. That fellowship was limited to a couple of people and a handful of dwarves and elves. Our fellowship requires all of us. And if we come together, we can succeed. We can reject the future of destruction that these weapons will bring and choose instead a future of life for ourselves and our children. So I ask all of you, join this fellowship, choose wisely, act with courage and determination, so that indeed our children may live. Thank you.